Good morning. Welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and this is for those of you who have not joined me in this before, this is my morning live where I talk about things connected to transitions, and particularly, as you can see, my business is called Transition Life Coaching. So I talk a bit about what kind of transitions we're talking about and different things that are connected to it. And of course, I will do a reading, sort of what I call a psychological reading, as opposed to a predicting the future kind of reading. But it's pretty much a message for the day that I usually use the Osho Zen Tarot. But I also, today I've actually pulled out the Black Moon Astrology cards, so I might pull one of these as well. We'll see how much time we have. These are about 30 minutes, but I find that I've been running over. For now, I'm feeling like I'm going to keep it till 6 to 6:30. If and at some point, I've had a lot of stuff I've had to get together. Yesterday was interesting because it was Mother's Day here in the States, and I had Mother's Day dinner. Now, one of the things I've forgotten to do was to change my schedule on. Now I use Wix for my scheduling rather than Acuity, which was the one I used before. And there's a lot of things I prefer about Acuity, but I had somebody book in right at the time I was going to lunch. I was like, whoops. But also, Wix never notified me. Like, this person had booked for like noontime, and 1:30 I got the notification. I was like, well, unfortunately this person emailed me, but I was just like, what is that? So I had to run some tests on Wix. Now it seems to be working okay, but I'm still going to check in with them because, I think I'll just say this to people. If you do book with me, and for some reason nothing comes back, there's no confirmation, I don't get back to you, or something weird happens, then email me at transitionlifecoaching22@gmail.com. That email is also it should be in the contact here. I don't generally, because right now I only have one phone, I don't have a separate business phone. That's why I generally don't give my number out until I've established that I'm working with a client. Then I usually do. That's why there's not a phone number up for me, because I just don't put my number out generally. So, yeah. And at some point, when I get to a point where I have enough coming in that I can say, oh yes, I can. And I already paid for one extra phone line for my mother. So that's why I'm like, I don't know if I want to add a second phone number at this point, especially a business line. So, because most of my work is done, via email or DM or things like that. So, yeah, so that's the best way to reach me if something like that should happen, if you should book in. I've updated some things. I've added the Wix app to my phone just to make sure that I'm not, now it seems to notify me about everything. Like, oh, somebody looked at your website. It's like, thanks. So, I don't know. It's kind of a strange thing, but we'll see. I guess the good thing about it is that I was able to iron out some of the glitches that I have with that particular software. So, so if you noticed this morning, what I posted was some Aurora Borealis photos. This was the first time. I hadn't really understood because a lot of people, especially that first night, that Friday, people were really just seeing the bright violet lights in the sky. Usually they were violet. Oftentimes the aurora is green, but we are having a severe solar storm, or we have been. Severe enough that NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Aviation Administration, I think that's what that is. They had issued a severe electromagnetic storm warning, which is very unusual that they would do that. But we've been having a number of these lately, like these solar flares that are really affecting the environment. And from an astrological standpoint, I mean, solar flares can have a real effect on things. I mean, it can have an effect on, in a practical sense, on our electronics and things like that. But astrologically, it can also have an effect on our energy levels, when that field reaches in. And really, whether it's going to be a quote-unquote good or bad effect kind of depends, I find. Just kind of like if you are in a highly geomagnetic location. Like I like to spend a lot of time in places like Avebury in England, or even certain parts of Glastonbury where these certain major ley lines, as they talk about, intersect and cross through. They call them the Michael and Mary lines. in particular, if you go down to Glastonbury, and I've actually stayed in Glastonbury, I'm sorry, in Avebury, and I've actually stayed in a room where the lines literally meet, and they kind of come together, and then they diverge a little farther down the stone circle. And I've stayed in a room that runs right under those lines, and I can tell you that sleeping in a room with high geomagnetic energy, I don't know. I mean, it was a very, very comfortable room, but I was very restless, I think, for a lot of the night, because there's just something about the energy that can make you very restless, I think. Yeah, it can affect everybody in a different way. One big astrological thing coming up on this coming Saturday, the 18th, is something called the Jupiter Cazimi. And a Cazimi there's actually a lot of astrologers who have not heard of this, and I've actually only heard of it recently. Oh, and good morning, Sam. When we talk about a Cazimi, it is actually an occurrence where a planet is considered to be within like 1 degree of the sun, right? Astrologically, in terms of its planetary position. So that's going to be coming up this coming Saturday, which is supposed to give people a big boost. Uranus has moved this morning too. Literally, I think I woke up at around 5:14, almost 5:15, and that's literally the time Uranus has shifted its position with respect to the sun. So they said today could be a day of unexpected things. The unexpected is kind of a little bit connected to the theme that I have today that I want to talk about, because there's a lot. As somebody who's a Taurian. Taurians are, and this is a theme that's come up with some of the work that I've done. Again, clients, friends, things like that. When we're very steady and practical people. When you're somebody who, we talked about routines yesterday, right? When you have that steady, it's just kind of like okay, and also someone who likes to plan. When you say okay, like when I used to be a manager, it would be like I would look if there was a discussion of goals for the year or something, I would be like, okay, well, how are we going to plan this out? How much is it going to cost? How many resources do we need? How many man hours do I need? How do I need to organize my staff? What do I need to tell them to do? Like, you like to have a nice plan. I had a boss who was very different. She was Aquarius, and she liked to, it wasn't that she didn't like to plan, but it was much more of a cerebral kind of planning. It was more of the mission statement, vision statement kind of planning, where, let's get our mission statement correct. Let's write out our goals in the fancy language that people want in academia. Let's read the university strategic plan, and then let's make the words in our strategic plan sound the same. I mean, that is the kind of game that people play. It's not that she was doing anything wrong by doing that. That was really part of her job. But when it came to the practical planning of something, she would start projects and then randomly go, I don't think this is going to work. Never mind. Let's just scrap all that. And my staff would get very, very upset, because they would say, well, I've put all this work into it. This is something I was taking pride in, and now she's just thrown the whole thing away because, never mind, And that was, it was at least one of the things when I was leaving my job, that I was at a point where a lot of the things that I felt were priorities for, the things I was responsible for, she's like, well, those aren't really my priorities. And again, from a high level perspective, I can understand why they weren't. But by the same token, I'm like, well, if nothing I'm doing here really matters, then, why work here? And that kind of is a theme that is coming up. But but again, as we talked yesterday about how you can just kind of get yourself into a routine, and you say, well, this isn't really working for me, but it's safe. But the question then becomes, and also I've talked a lot recently about hanged man energy, right? Where we are in a position where we feel stuck, or maybe even Two of Swords energy might be a little better, because Two of Swords is literally like a stalemate. And a stalemate can mean we're in a tense situation and we're not moving either way. But on the other end of the spectrum, it's also known, like in certain decks, in esoteric decks, as the truce card. So it's like, okay, we have a moment of peace. It's like the Pax Romana. We have this peace for the moment because there's no conflict going on right now. And sometimes if we've had a lot of conflict, then we want to have, we like the moments of peace that we have. We like to feel like, okay, I'm here and I'm at peace. But those moments don't last. Basically, if your life, it's funny, whenever I would read there's certain, okay, let's just say certain religious groups who are missionaries, and they like to leave literature on your door and things like that. I won't name any of them by name, although I probably could. But and it'll be something like, wouldn't it be great if life was just paradise and everything was perfect every day? Like, it's almost like this idea of returning to Eden. Like, if we were in Eden, and good morning, Suda. If it was just, if we were in this perfect paradise, like they would say, oh, because some people, it's very interesting with that particular myth, because some people look at Eden as a mistake. Like that's actually the myth of our whole civilization, at least European civilization and American civilization that is biblically influenced in some way, it's so. But and so what a lot of times we treat it as, we'd call that the original sin, right? The original sin of when Eve eating the fruit, Samael, or some people say Satan, whatever, the serpent in the garden, who is interpreted in various ways. In Gnosticism, obviously, the serpent has a very different interpretation. The serpent is actually seen as the holy wisdom who's coming into the garden, rather than some kind of villainous character. But what happens is they take the fruit, and once they eat the fruit, then they know difference. Okay, like her and Adam look at each other, and they know they're aware of each other's naughty bits, and then they realize like, oh, and then they cover themselves, because now the fact that they're different somehow or the fact that they have reproductive organs is somehow a source of shame, which is interesting. That is the word that they use there, covering their shame. And then at that point, that's when Yahweh comes over and says, hey, who told you were different? But as I pointed out in classes I teach on creation myth, is that's actually the moment where life begins, because that is the moment where you become aware of, when you are aware of difference, when you are aware of time. That's when you start measuring time, when you start measuring things in terms of days, or the movements of the stars, or the constellations, or when you start doing that, this is how we order and we measure with time. But to be in the field of time means you also experience death. That's why you have the idea of the fates. You have the beginning of your life, the thread of your life that's spun, and then it's cut at some point, right? Nobody's immortal. And biblically, this is the moment at which humans stop being immortal in theory. Okay, but that's because when you talk about the field of Eden, you're not talking about an actual place on the earth. People try to say, oh, well, it's this place they're talking about, 4 rivers, it's probably by the Tigris, Euphrates. Yeah, okay, maybe conceptually that's where it's configured, but it's really not a space that has anything to do with here. It's a space outside of time, and we don't function outside of time. A lot of these myths have to do with making sense of the ordering principles and how we function in the field of time. So we tend to look at that as a mistake, that somehow coming into the field of time and into life is a mistake, but it's not a mistake. We're in a place where this is what life is, and I think a lot of the times when we decide that we want something to last forever, so if we go back to these people who say, oh, we could have been in Eden forever, I'm like, no, you couldn't have, actually. I mean, if you did, then you wouldn't have any kind of, life as we know it would never exist, because in order for things to exist, that's the insight of Western religion, is that, this, the idea of separation, the idea of how, this is the... like I said, I think I've said before, in Eastern religion, they look at it as the idea that transcends separation. So they say, oh, well, yeah, everything appears to be separate, but that's an illusion. In Western, we say, no, the condition of life is that everything is separate. And so we interpret everything in terms of separation. And separation brings sorrow because things do come to an end. Okay, so that's the whole thing behind it. And so, but the thing is... and again, I'll refer back to Joseph Campbell, just because he seems to have... He's one of the people who kind of talks about this in a more accessible kind of a way. And he said, to say that somehow that was a mistake and life shouldn't have happened, he says, I just see that as really childish. I mean, this was what Campbell had said. He said, it's sort of like, you're here to participate, you're here to play. And that's the piece... the topic that came up for me to discuss today was that of innocence. And that of, and again, I've talked about beginner's mind a few times, but the idea of innocence. So what does it mean to be innocent? And is it possible to be innocent after you have lived a life of negative experiences or traumas? I mean, you don't get through this world without wounding of some kind. We talk about childhood as a state of innocence. Of course, we know that children don't always have innocent lives, right? They don't always, sadly, we'd hope that childhood is like a happy, imaginative time. But there's a lot of children who are forced to, as we say, grow up very, very quickly. And it should be a safe space where, where kids play and are expected to play. And it's kind of concerned me more and more over the years when I'm looking at, especially the way education systems are, and the way education, because I used to buy a lot of materials on my job for educational programs. And we had, one of our professors had actually gotten a set of textbooks from one of the major textbooks publishers, and I can't remember. There was a couple different ones, but they gave her as an instructor, she got a whole bunch of like free copies of very expensive textbooks for children of various elementary. I think that's not maybe a few high school ones, but mainly elementary school ones. And as I went through and I was trying to organize these, because that's part of my job, I did metadata and so forth, and I was looking at these, I was really kind of, I don't know, I guess disturbed. And nowadays people would say, so what? But I was somewhat disturbed to see textbooks for kindergartners. We're going to teach kindergartners science. We're going to start teaching them math. We're going to teach them this and that. And okay, on the one hand, I get the idea that the younger you start a child with something, the more they're likely to retain it. Like my grandniece is learning, she's learning Spanish and American Sign Language in addition to English in her classes in California, and she's only 2. And she can do both. She can, when she wants water, she says agua, and then she makes the sign for it when she wants to. Even though she's not, they're not a Spanish family, but that's what she will do because the younger you start somebody, the more that that might be just ingrained in them. Whereas if like as an adult, if you try to sit down and learn a language, it's not impossible, but you have that beginner's mind as a child. So frequently you will see things that talk about going back to the stage of childhood. And if we are going to talk about the idea of death, loss, and rebirth, and again, not death in a literal sense, but death in a figurative sense, when something in our life has completely changed and our identity's changed, it's like we're in a new place. We're at a new starting point. And now we're in a space where we need to think about, what does it mean to be back at the beginning? But a lot of times we don't do that. We continually refer back to the past because that's the automatic reaction. That's not a criticism. That's just what we do. We refer back to our past experience because that's the way we're conditioned. We're conditioned that there's a cause or there to everything, or there's an origin to everything. And so we kind of go back. And so something happens that we're like, oh, this I relate this to this experience that I've had. But how do we get to beginner's mind and look at something with completely fresh eyes, as if we've never seen it before? It's the idea of looking at something with wonder and allowing our imagination, because that's the other thing too. We're taught that somehow imagination is a bad thing. It's a childish thing. Oh, like it's a delusion. You're delusional because you have an imagination. Well, no. Imagination is where things come from. That's where great discoveries come from, where new inventions come from imagination, from creativity. Which is another concern I always have about letting AI do everything for you, because it's like, okay, I understand where AI can be useful for certain things. I've used AI sometimes when I'm really having trouble brainstorming about something. I might pop the question into ChatGPT and just see what it says. Doesn't mean I'm going to take what it says, but sometimes it'll say, oh, okay, it's mentioning these things. That's not quite where I'm going with it, but it used that one word, and now that triggers something in my own creativity. Like that, I feel like is not a bad use of AI. It's just you are using it to. It might just provide you with another perspective based on kind of this hive mind that it is. But people who say, well, I'm going to write all my papers. People producing entire books in AI, or even the way that it ends up certain aspects of technology end up influencing music and other things, or even art. again, it's like, what's the limit of that? At what point are we giving up our own creativity? Because really, I think we live in a world where maybe we're so jaded and so stressed, and a lot of people are so traumatized and so triggered that you don't get back to a point where you can feel that innocence. Maybe some people in their lifetime never felt it, which is very sad. But I remember when I was taking my psychoanalysis courses in grad school, I had a psychoanalyst for a professor, and she said, the way she put it is, if you've never been happy, if you have a client, if I have a patient who's never been happy, then it's extremely difficult to explain to that person about getting back to happiness. If we've had a point in our life where we've been happy, it's not necessarily that we have to go live in the past, like live in that moment, but that if we're going to use it as a reference point, that's the reference point that we have for what it means to be happy. And so when we good morning, Allie. So we have this reference point for happiness, and so some people don't have that. So the question is, how do you recreate that when you've been through a lot of bad experiences, when you've gotten your hopes up? And in some cases, like a question that came up to me recently was like, okay, I followed my intuition to its conclusion on something, and then something terrible happened. Or it didn't work out the way I thought, or it wasn't the thing that I thought it was going to be. I thought that, I've jumped from this stressful situation to this one. And sometimes there's stepping stones along the way. You could leave one situation and then up in another one. I've had situations in the long past with people who will be unhappy, say, in a job that they're in, and then they'll pick up another job. Maybe it's in the same organization, maybe it's maybe doing the same kind of work, but they'll say to me, well, I think I really need to make this change. And I'll say, well, okay, but the only thing is you're not really making a change. It's almost like you're making a lateral move. Even if you make more money, or even if you have more responsibility. I mean, if that's what you're looking to do, is you want a stepping stone and move up, okay, then that's fine. But a lot of times you're just moving from the same one version, same stuff, different, variation on the environment, same thing, same game. So you're not really changing anything. But we do have this tendency to want to go back to what is comfortable. So when you talk in Buddhism, or you talk in the different meditative things about being in the present, being in the present is really, really hard. If you've ever sat down and tried to do it, like I said, I work with a Hindu guru, with a teacher who has done certain meditations, which I would love to be able to teach people, but I'm not authorized to. I can point people to authorized people who do teach it for free, but it's a certain type of meditation. This particular one I'm talking about is called IAM, and Integrated Amrita Meditation. And what it does is when I use that, it really kind of centers and focuses you, because it's sort of a combination of yogas with certain visualizations. Because the thing is, a lot of times people try to meditate by saying, well, I'm just going to empty my mind for 5 minutes. Well, good luck. I mean, your thoughts are going to just keep going. And even if, but somehow there's some aspects of that meditation, I think, that trick the mind into being quiet. But as she has said to me, she said, well, even if the mind is quiet for a minute or even 30 seconds, that's profound. It's very difficult for that to happen. So a lot of times you will hear about exercises where somebody will say, like you'll be washing dishes or something, or just doing some kind of mundane task, where you're really, really focused on the task that you're doing. Because a lot of times we're doing tasks, and at the same time we're doing it like, all right, I got to go here tomorrow, and I got to do this, and I got to do that, and oh, this is the next thing I have to do. Oh, and this is the next thing on my list. We do that all the time. So just trying to say, it's like none of that exists. I'm just right here. I'm just right here at this point, and this is what I'm doing. And your focus is entirely on that. And if you have thoughts, you just kind of let them go, because your focus, you don't try to stop your thoughts, because when you start trying to push your thoughts back, that doesn't really work either. The idea is you just let the thoughts do their thing, and eventually you detach from those thoughts, and so that way you're not so focused on them. But so the question is, how do you stay in the present and not be in this interpretation mode all the time? And a lot of this is going back to the idea of play and of imagination, of kind of going back to this beginner's mind that we have, and so you know, there's a lot of people I see work with who do like inner child work and stuff like that. And I don't know. I mean, I guess there's people who get something out of it. I think maybe because, I mean, actually, I did have a very imaginative childhood, but I was born in Saturn Mahadasha, so I think to a certain extent I've been a little old woman since the time I was born. Because I've always thought about these things. I mean, I was thinking, I remember taking out books on the stuff I talk about now, like in the second grade. I don't know. It's just, maybe it's a past life thing for me, or another lifetime, or concurrent lifetime, however you want to look at it. But I've always been like that. But I was still a very imaginative child. I would see things and I'd be like, wow, I want to do that. I want to make that happen. And I mean, people would kind of laugh, you know, because as we always look at our limitations, we go, oh, well, that's not realistic. And yeah, I get it. There's certain areas where we need to temper ourselves with that realism. But when it comes to being creative, when trying to see about where we're going, part of that beginner's mind is just allowing us to look at all possibilities without going, oh yeah, but that's never going to work because. And just allowing us to live in with possibility. It doesn't mean we have to manifest everything right away, but it's like living in that possibility all the time and looking at everything as though it's wonderful, like really looking at stuff. One of the reasons I love sitting here in the morning and looking at things is because sometimes you really just kind of get to look at things and it can put you in the moment of just enjoying the fact that there's like birds outside your window, or that, just the way that the sky looks in the morning or something. And again, you're just different things to sort of kind of keep you in the moment, even if you know you're going to have a busy day the rest of the day. A lot of times I tell people, try to put aside time. Try to put aside, like, even if you only have 15 minutes, 30 minutes, to try to just be in that kind of a space. Because it's very, very hard to do this kind of long term. It's very hard to... I mean, the kind of lives that we lead, it's impossible to tell somebody like, yeah, you're going to be in that state of mind all day. But even just trying to get used to that and making that more and more part of your life, and eventually kind of getting away from the mindset that I have to plan and I have to be a step ahead of everything. I have to be constantly future looking, or I have to be continually referencing the past for everything that I do. It's, you know, it's not that past experience isn't valuable, but sometimes we are so heavily reliant on what's gone before. What's gone before may have nothing to do with what's coming. That's like kind of that, when I talk about Uranus and Taurus, when that hit in like around 2018, for me it hit in 2019 because I'm very early in Taurus in terms of astrologically where I am on the in the decans. But it just, I mean, it literally turns everything upside down and you think, that's it, my life's a catastrophe, I'm falling apart. And it's like, well, but maybe you're falling apart so that you can put it together again in a different way. Not try to repeat the old thing, but just kind of getting a sense of wonder about what's coming on. So let's do our reading for today, because I'm always amazed at how much I can talk. I'm like, it's already 6:58, and I try to keep this to 30 minutes. Oh, I needed to hear that. I'm so glad that was the message that I got today. They're like, yep, this is what you're going to talk about. So I was like, okay, so good. I'm glad this is what you need to hear today. Let's see what our reading says for today. Okay. So what do we need to look out for today? Okay. Oh, this is interesting. Ooh, this is a card I mentioned yesterday. Wow. All right, so our first card here is our strength card, which is courage. And I like this card a lot because, as you can see, we've gotten this card before, but there's the rocks here, and there's this flower that manages to push itself up through the rocks. So this really does convey an attitude of innocence as well. It's the idea of, in spite of what appears to be an impossibility, something can still come out of it. Something grows. Something is still creative. Something still comes out of this space because it's not put off by the fact, you're not looking at a situation and going, oh no, well, too many obstacles, forget it, can't do it. It's telling you that, well, you know, it's really funny. I think somebody was saying to me, we talk about plants and we talk about nature, And we think of ourselves as being kind of the strongest species, but I'm like, I can go out and mow the lawn and cut things down in my yard, like the weeds and everything, and like literally 2 days later, they will be back where they were before. And I'm like, okay, if that isn't resilience, I don't know what it is. I mean, that's resilience that I think all us humans can only dream about, right? But there's a level of resilience there, and I said, there can be a natural, like, okay, you've been cut down, but you can pop right back again. There is such a thing. The inner feeling of which we're unaware, yeah, we've talked about this week too, the suppression card, okay? 10 of Wands, internally being overburdened, overworked, feeling like our energy of who we are and what we want to be is being suppressed because of our obligations. And then here's our external feeling of which we're aware. The morality card. I talked about this card the other day. This is the Queen of Clouds. And as you can see, she has this very puritanical look to her. And again, and the meaning of this card is drop your morals. And what it means by that is not that we all of a sudden are going to go out and stop acting like a civilized society that cares about each other, but it's more about drop your morality, drop the idea of if you take some time out for yourself, if you take time to imagine, that's just being childish. You're supposed to focus, be a grown up and focus on your adult responsibilities. That's the morality that's built in about what it means to be a grown up, what it means to adult, right? And we feel that taking time out for ourselves or taking time to create or play or use our imagination is somehow we're not being responsible. And this is saying, throw that idea away. It's definitely an inherent part of things because then we're in a state of compromise. Six of Pentacles, I saw somebody, one of the readers I followed got Six of Pentacles today. See, this is not seeing this as a card, that's usually considered to be a card of charity, but this is a card of compromise. Because when you have these two people and they're kind of giving this, they're like having this kind of, they're like touching each other's thumbs in a way. It's kind of hard to see here in a way but there's a suggestion here that there's something nefarious going on or something that is kind of a shady kind of a dealing. And and this is the kind of deals that we put ourselves in. We say, well, this is the thing that I'm really interested in, or this is the thing I really want to do. But this is what I need to do to adult. So I'm going to do this adulting thing. And I'll make some time for that. But then the thing is, we never make time for that other thing. We compromise everything because we say, well, this is the safer thing to do, or this is what will get me social approval, and then maybe I'll have this double life and I'll be doing something else. I think we all play that game in some way to some degree, but ultimately, again, we have our Nietzschean rebirth card, and rebirth, again. And as I mentioned earlier, this is that from Thus Spake Zarathustra. It's hard to say that without thinking about it. So you've got the camel, and then you've got the lion and the boy. And that was the story, Nietzsche's story, that one moves from being a camel, where one is complacent, and then when things start to happen in life, or things are not going according to whatever your vision was, maybe when you were younger, you start to roar like a lion. You're in rebellion. You shout back against what you perceive as the unfairness of life, or it's almost like you're fighting to be who you are. But then you move from that space into that of a child again. So this really does count. It's like moving back into that space of innocence where because it's different in the way. There's a point in our lives, in religious studies we talk about demythologization. So this was explained to me by a religion professor in terms of what he calls natural literalism, demythologization, and then what he would call forced literalism. And this was a discussion of evangelical religion. So what it is when you're born, you have a natural literalism, okay? So you have this, and that's part of this beginner's mind. Like that's why you say you take everything literally. It's like if someone tells you that there's a place called heaven and there's a God in it, you say, yeah, there's literally a place up in the clouds. Like you take it in a very literal kind of a sense. Or you just believe like all people are a certain way or something. Like you have some kind of belief that you're taught growing up, and that's the belief that you have. But then as you get older, your experiences contradict that. And that's when you start to demythologize. You become disillusioned and you go, oh, well, obviously I believe this as a child, but clearly this isn't true. And then you become disillusioned, and that's when you start to build cynicism and you start to be skeptical and say, life isn't what I thought it was. this isn't what I thought I was. For people in the religious sense, they may say, well, the heck with it, I'm throwing religion out because, there's no literal God in heaven, so clearly none of this is real. But see, the process of demythologization doesn't necessarily have to mean that. It depends on the kind of impact that it has on you. Atheism doesn't have to be the logical conclusion, is what I'm saying. It can be the example my professor used to use was Santa Claus. He would say, okay, when you're a child, you might literally believe in Santa Claus. Like, yeah, Santa comes and, leaves gifts and comes down the chimney, whatever that is, right? And then when you, at certain age, you find out, well, no, Santa's like your parents or whoever is acting in that role to leave presents and act as Santa. But as he had said, the fact that Santa isn't real doesn't mean that Christmas suddenly has no meaning. You know what I mean? There's still a meaning to it. It's just your meaning of it is going to change as you get older and as you learn more things or as you experience more things. Because with experience, our world should broaden. It shouldn't contract. And I think for a lot of times what happens is initially our world may contract in some ways. I think that's why when we're teenagers, we kind of like, we hate everybody and stay in our room. I don't know, at least I was like that. But it was, well, I can't say I hated everybody, but I was very, very solitary in a lot of ways. And people can become that way because you kind of retract because now your worldview is changing and now you need time to kind of integrate all of that material. So we do need these kind of timed outs. But then eventually you come out into the world again and now you have a different new understanding of the world where you have incorporated your past experience, but instead of using it to contract and pull back, you use it to expand outwards. You use it to broaden your world rather than to narrow it. Okay, if that makes sense to people. So you're saying you're so at the cusp. Yeah, it's it's so interesting there, the way that we're kind of on, we can be on the edge of those things and where the way in which, I don't know, it's interesting because there's so much here. Yeah, there's like the change. And actually what you're saying there, yeah, that's something I've been feeling for a long time too. I almost feel like, I don't know if a lot of people feel this, I feel like I'm waiting to wait right now. I'm waiting to see, I know something is coming and I'm doing stuff, but I'm like, I feel this, like, there's just going to be some big thing coming. But like the Zen masters, you kind of say, oh, well, when it shows up, it shows up, and then we make this, then we make the change. So let's just see. Oh, and this is interesting because, we have this Aries card here. I just wanted to pull one of the astrology cards. And Aries is, obviously Aries is fire energy. This is active energy. I saw this in somebody's reading yesterday. I'm going to be putting up the Libra through Pisces readings today. They're already done. I just have to flip them to live on YouTube. But yeah, there's this is a time really for what's going on now to be active maybe and not to be passive. And I think when I think of the active Aries energy, that people think of it as aggressive energy, but it actually can just be that fire that is inspirational too. Fire can be inspirational. It doesn't just have to be just something, an expression of rage or anger or a kind of passion that, sometimes passion taking us out of our head is not a bad thing. People always act like, oh no, you that's the other thing, you always want to keep, that's that morality. You always need to keep a cool head about everything. I don't know, sometimes you just need to play. I was talking with a friend about dancing the other day. And if you see people spontaneously dance somewhere, you're just kind of like, but there's kind of a dance that goes on. And dancing is actually a very good metaphor for a lot of this because it's about, you are, when you dance, you're in the moment of the dance. It's like playing a piece of music. The goal is not to get to the end of it. Like, let's hurry up and get to the end of this, It's something you're in the moment with. So yeah, it's almost like treating it like a dance. Like you're not trying to get to a point where you're not really worried about time, or you're not worried about who's watching, or you're not worried about anything. It's like the only time is now, and that's what's really meant by that. When we say the only time is now, is that that's the point from which you can always operate from beginner's mind. So when you're at that point, then whatever happens, you're not interpreting it from a place of trauma, and you're not worried about what the future is going to bring. It's just, well, I'm here, and whatever happens, happens. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, great. That's that. But I can say that here to you on a live stream. It's exceedingly difficult to do. But it doesn't mean it isn't worth trying to, especially when we're at a point when everything kind of comes crashing down around us. That's the point where we have nothing to lose, and we're just like, okay, well, let's, why not start again this way? So so it's interesting. When I do work with people, I do have certain ways that we try to help shift people into that kind of beginner's mind. But it is a process. It's not like, okay, here's one technique and that's it. Your life is changed by tomorrow. It's something that takes a certain amount of focus at first, and then eventually it becomes something natural. So, well, we're at 7:10, and so I'm going to close this for today. But I want to thank all of you for joining. It's really great. I'm really happy to see more people stepping up and coming onto these live streams. And of course, the full recording will be available here on Instagram, and then I'm also going to upload it to YouTube this morning after I get all my other videos posted. Those who follow Katonia Podcast, there's a new podcast coming out today, and I'm live streaming again at noon on that channel because this is my Monday live stream day. So, so if you enjoy listening to me talk, you can listen to me talk over there too if you have time. And again, as usual, the recording will be available and on my Katonia YouTube channel. So thank you guys so much. Love seeing all of you, and we will do this again tomorrow. So you are welcome, and we will see you then. Take care. Bye.